You're listening to How to Sleep with ADHD, written by Stephen Miller and produced by Audio Antiqua Productions. Chapter 1: Stop Forcing Sleep. Start Creating Safety. Most people believe sleep is something you do, something you accomplish through effort, discipline, or exhaustion. You lie down, you close your eyes, and then you try to sleep. For the ADHD brain, this approach quietly guarantees failure. Here is the foundation of this entire book. Sleep does not come from effort. Sleep comes from safety. And the sentence you will return to again and again is this: sleep is permission, not pressure. Say it slowly. Sleep is permission, not pressure. From a scientific perspective, sleep is not initiated by the thinking mind. It is governed by the autonomic nervous system, the system that constantly decides whether you are safe enough to rest or alert enough to respond. Deep sleep requires a shift away from sympathetic activation, often called fight or flight, and into parasympathetic dominance, the state associated with restoration and recovery. This is not theory. This is well documented physiology. Research on insomnia and hyperarousal, including foundational studies by Bonnet and Aron, shows that many people who struggle to sleep are not lacking fatigue. They are stuck in a state of physiological alertness. Their heart rate remains elevated. Cortisol secretion stays high. Brain activity fails to downshift. The body is tired. The nervous system is not safe. This pattern appears even more strongly in individuals with ADHD. Modern neuroscience increasingly understands ADHD not as a simple attention deficit, but as a condition involving dysregulation of arousal. Studies using EEG and functional imaging show that ADHD brains often struggle to modulate activation levels. They can be under-aroused when stimulation is required and over-aroused when rest is needed. So when night comes, something critical is missing. There is no clean internal signal that says the day is complete. Without that signal, the nervous system keeps scanning. It reviews conversations, it replays mistakes, it generates ideas, it anticipates tomorrow. Not because something is wrong, but because nothing has told it to stand down. This is why forcing sleep does not work. Effort communicates urgency. Urgency communicates threat, and threat keeps you awake. This is also why watching the clock is so damaging. Research on sleep performance anxiety shows that monitoring time increases cortical arousal and delays sleep onset. Each glance reinforces the belief that something important is at stake. So the first transformation in this book is not adding a new technique. It is stopping a harmful behavior. Stop demanding sleep from your body. Your body already knows how to sleep. It learned long before your mind learned to worry. What it needs now is permission to release control. That permission is communicated through safety cues. Safety cues are signals, physical, sensory, and environmental, that tell the nervous system nothing more is required of you right now. These cues work beneath conscious thought. You cannot argue your nervous system into calm. You must show it. Neuroscience is clear on this point. The nervous system learns through repetition and predictability. When the same cues appear night after night, the brain begins to associate them with closure. For the ADHD brain, this matters deeply. Novelty excites, predictability calms. Here are three practical safety cues you can begin using immediately. First, light. Light is one of the strongest regulators of circadian rhythm. Research by Chasler and colleagues demonstrates that bright light suppresses melatonin and signals daytime alertness, while dim, warm light encourages parasympathetic activation. Instruction: lower your lights at the same time every evening, not when you feel tired, at a fixed hour. Let your nervous system learn the pattern. Second, clothing and posture. Changing into sleep clothing earlier than you think you should is not symbolic. It is sensory. The skin is directly connected to the brain through somatosensory pathways. A change in texture and pressure signals a change in state. Instruction: stop wearing day clothes late into the night. Let your body feel the transition before your mind understands it. Third, stillness without input. No scrolling, no planning, no consuming. Just allowing the nervous system to experience a lack of demand. This is where ancient wisdom quietly agrees with modern science. The biblical command, be still, is often interpreted as poetic or spiritual, but stillness is also physiological. Reduced sensory input lowers sympathetic activity and increases vagal tone, the marker of parasympathetic engagement. Stillness is not passivity. Stillness is safety. Scripture consistently links rest with trust. In the Psalms, we read, "In peace I will lie down and sleep, for you alone make me dwell in safety." The order matters. Safety comes first, sleep follows. This mirrors exactly what sleep research shows. For many people with ADHD, stimulation has become a coping mechanism. Noise, movement, and mental activity can feel stabilizing during the day. But at night, those same strategies keep the nervous system alert. This leads to one of the most important behavioral changes you will make. Stop problem solving in bed. Clinical research on stimulus control therapy shows that when the bed becomes associated with thinking, planning, or emotional processing, sleep quality deteriorates. When the bed is reserved for rest, sleep latency improves. Instruction: if a thought appears, do not wrestle with it. Do not suppress it. Label it gently as tomorrow and return your attention to your chosen safety cue. Remember this sentence: nothing gets solved in bed. Creativity at night is common in ADHD because external demands drop and cognitive freedom increases. But sleep requires closure, not expansion. As you practice these steps, something subtle happens. Your nervous system begins to trust that night does not require vigilance, that stillness is not dangerous, that letting go does not mean losing control. This trust is built through repetition, not perfection. You are no longer chasing sleep. You are inviting it. You are no longer forcing rest. You are removing the signals of threat. This principle forms the foundation of everything that follows. Sleep is permission, not pressure. And as the Bible quietly reminds us, He grants sleep to those He loves, not to those who strive harder, but to those who are willing to rest. You have learned why effort fails. You have learned why safety matters. Now it is time to understand the mismatch that keeps so many ADHD minds awake. Your thinking brain may be exhausted, but something deeper is still on guard. You stopped forcing sleep. Now let's uncover why tiredness alone is never enough. Chapter 2. Your brain is tired. Your nervous system is not. One of the most confusing experiences for people with ADHD is this: you feel exhausted, your body feels heavy, your eyes want to close, and yet sleep does not come. Instead, your thoughts speed up, your motivation suddenly spikes, your brain offers ideas it ignored all day. This is where many people misunderstand what is actually happening. So let's state the core truth of this chapter clearly. Fatigue is not the same as readiness. Say it again. Fatigue is not the same as readiness. You can be deeply tired and still completely unprepared for sleep. From a scientific standpoint, sleep readiness is not determined by how exhausted you feel. It is determined by the state of your nervous system, specifically, whether your body has shifted out of vigilance and into safety. A DHD insomnia is not excess energy, it is dysregulation. The thinking brain wants rest. The nervous system is still bracing. Research in psychophysiology consistently supports this. Studies on hyperarousal and insomnia show that many poor sleepers exhibit elevated sympathetic nervous system activity at night. Heart rate variability is reduced. Cortisol remains elevated. The body behaves as if it must stay alert. In ADHD, this pattern is amplified. Neuroscientific research suggests that ADHD involves altered regulation of arousal systems, including dopamine and norepinephrine pathways. These systems help the brain decide when to engage and when to disengage. When regulation is inconsistent, transitions become difficult, especially the transition from wakefulness to sleep. This explains why ADHD brains often feel wired but tired. The fatigue is real, but the readiness is missing. So, what keeps the nervous system braced at night? Often, it is the absence of structure. During the day, external demands create boundaries. Work has a start and an end. Tasks impose limits. Time is segmented. Even stress can be regulating because it gives the nervous system something to respond to. At night, those structures disappear. And for the ADHD nervous system, unstructured time can feel unsafe. Without clear signals of closure, the body fills the gap with activity. This is why late night scrolling feels so compelling. It provides stimulation and predictability at the same time. Each swipe offers novelty, while the screen itself offers a sense of containment. But neurologically, scrolling keeps the brain engaged. Blue light suppresses melatonin. Novel content activates dopamine pathways. Emotional triggers activate stress responses. So while it feels calming, it is activating. Another common pattern is mental rehearsal. You replay conversations. You imagine future scenarios. You plan how you will explain, fix, or improve something tomorrow. This feels productive, but it is a form of threat monitoring. The nervous system stays engaged because it believes preparation is necessary. Then there is the sudden burst of motivation. After midnight, ideas appear. Projects feel exciting. You feel capable in ways you did not during the day. This is not a coincidence. When external demands disappear, the ADHD brain finally experiences freedom. Dopamine increases. Cognitive flexibility improves. The mind opens. But this is the worst possible time to activate. Remember the anchor phrase: fatigue is not the same as readiness. Feeling energized does not mean you are rested. It means your nervous system has found stimulation. So the transformation required in this chapter is not about eliminating tiredness. It is about preparing the nervous system for disengagement. Here is the key behavioral shift. Stop using stimulation to manage fatigue. Fatigue tempts you to seek stimulation because stimulation temporarily overrides exhaustion, but stimulation delays sleep by reinforcing alertness. Instead, you must learn to let fatigue exist without fixing it. This feels uncomfortable at first. When the nervous system is dysregulated, stillness can feel like exposure. Silence can feel loud. Inactivity can feel unsafe. But this discomfort is not danger. It is unfamiliar regulation. From a biological standpoint, readiness for sleep requires parasympathetic dominance. This is associated with slower breathing, reduced muscle tension, and a sense of internal quiet. So here is a practical instruction. When you feel tired but restless, do not add input. Remove it. Lower light further. Reduce sound. Slow your movements. Think of this as guiding your nervous system down a ramp, not pushing it off a cliff. Another crucial instruction: do not trust midnight motivation. It feels real. It feels important. It feels urgent. But it is a byproduct of dysregulation, not clarity. Neuroscience shows that sleep deprivation increases impulsivity and distorts reward perception. Late night confidence is often chemically induced, not strategically sound. So write ideas down if you must. Capture them, then close the loop. Remember the phrase from the previous chapter: nothing gets solved in bed. This chapter adds a companion truth. Readiness must be created. You do not wait for it. You prepare for it. This preparation happens through consistency. When the nervous system learns that night always follows the same pattern, it stops bracing. It no longer needs to stay alert just in case. This is why bedtime routines are not about relaxation techniques. They are about predictability. Predictability creates safety. Safety creates readiness. Readiness allows sleep. Ancient wisdom mirrors this insight. Scripture speaks often of rest as something entered into, not collapsed into. There remains a rest for the people of God, the text says, not a rest for the exhausted, but for those who cease striving. Notice the implication. Rest is not the reward for depletion. Rest is the result of release. So when you lie awake at night, remind yourself, my brain is tired. My nervous system is learning. Fatigue is not the same as readiness. This chapter teaches you to stop confusing exhaustion with preparation, to stop feeding stimulation to a system that needs reassurance, to stop interpreting restlessness as failure. You are not wired wrong. You are just still braced. And now that you understand this distinction, you are ready for the next layer of the problem, because once readiness begins to form, another obstacle often appears, one that feels calming but quietly keeps you awake. You've learned that fatigue isn't enough. Now let's talk about the trap of nighttime stimulation. Chapter 3: Dopamine is not peace. Many people say the same thing at night. I just need something to relax. Scrolling helps me unwind. This is how I calm my brain. For the ADHD mind, this belief feels obvious, familiar, comforting, and yet it is one of the biggest reasons sleep stays out of reach. So let's name the central truth of this chapter clearly. Dopamine is not peace. And the reminder you will hear again and again is this: what feels calming can still be activating. Say it slowly. What feels calming can still be activating. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter associated with motivation, novelty, learning, and reward anticipation. It is not a relaxation chemical. It does not prepare the body for rest. It prepares the brain for engagement. From a scientific perspective, dopamine increases alertness. It sharpens attention. It signals importance. It tells the brain, this matters, stay awake. This is why dopamine based activities feel good when you are tired. They temporarily override fatigue. They give the brain something to lock onto. But overriding fatigue is not the same as creating readiness for sleep. In ADHD, dopamine regulation is already altered. Research shows that ADHD brains often have lower baseline dopamine signaling, which increases the drive to seek stimulation. Novelty, movement, and reward become tools for self-regulation. During the day, this can be adaptive. At night, it becomes a trap. Here is what typically happens. As evening arrives, external structure disappears. Work ends. Messages slow. Obligations fade. The brain, which relied on structure to regulate itself, suddenly feels uncontained. For the nervous system, uncontained time can feel unsafe. So the ADHD brain does what it knows how to do. It seeks dopamine. Late night scrolling is the most common example. Each swipe offers novelty. Each post carries the promise of something interesting. Dopamine spikes briefly, then drops, then spikes again. Neurologically, this keeps the brain in a loop of anticipation. Research on digital media consumption shows that variable reward schedules, like social media feeds, are particularly activating. They mimic the same reinforcement patterns studied in behavioral psychology experiments. The brain stays alert because it does not know what is coming next. So even if your body is still, your brain is hunting. Another common dopamine source is emotional stimulation. dramatic videos, heated discussions, intense music, even nostalgic content. These do not calm the nervous system. They activate emotional processing networks and increase arousal. They feel absorbing, not soothing. This is why you can feel relaxed while scrolling and still be unable to sleep. Relaxed is not the same as regulated. Here is the phrase again. What feels calming can still be activating. Dopamine feels like relief because it distracts from fatigue and discomfort. But distraction is not rest. True rest requires a reduction in stimulation, not a substitution of it. This is where transformation begins. The instruction in this chapter is simple but challenging. Stop confusing stimulation with regulation. Regulation is quiet. Regulation is boring. Regulation does not spike. From a biological standpoint, preparing for sleep requires reduced dopamine activity and increased parasympathetic tone. Melatonin release is inhibited by stimulation, especially light and novelty. So when you stimulate yourself at night, you are not failing at sleep. You are doing exactly what stimulation is designed to do. The question becomes, what do you replace it with? Not force, not effort, but containment. Containment is the feeling that nothing new is required of you. No decisions, no surprises, no emotional swings. This is why predictable routines are so powerful for ADHD sleep. Predictability lowers dopamine demand. It tells the brain there is nothing to look for. Here is a practical behavioral shift. Reduce novelty before bed. Not forever, not all evening, but in the final window before sleep. Choose activities that are familiar, repetitive, and emotionally neutral. The same book, the same music, the same prayer, the same sequence. This is not deprivation, it is guidance. Another key instruction: do not seek calm, seek low activation. Calm is subjective, activation is physiological. Ask a different question at night. Not, does this relax me? But, does this wake my brain? If the activity pulls you forward mentally, it is activating. If it opens loops, creates curiosity, or sparks emotion, it is activating. Even if it feels good, remember the anchor phrase: what feels calming can still be activating. ADHD brains often resist this truth because stimulation has been a lifeline. It helped you cope, it helped you focus, it helped you survive long days. This book is not asking you to give up stimulation. It is asking you to time it wisely. Night is not the time for dopamine-driven regulation. Night is the time for safety-driven regulation. Ancient wisdom echoes this distinction. Scripture repeatedly contrasts peace with excitement, rest with striving. The mind governed by the flesh is death, one passage says, but the mind governed by the Spirit is life and peace. The contrast is not moral, it is directional. Peace moves inward, stimulation moves outward. Science agrees. Peaceful states are associated with slower neural oscillations, reduced sensory input, and parasympathetic activation. Dopamine-driven states are fast, outward-facing, and anticipatory. So when night comes, you are not called to entertain yourself into sleep. You are called to release yourself into rest. This does not mean your mind will immediately quiet. It means you stop feeding it novelty. You stop giving it reasons to stay alert. You allow boredom. You allow silence. You allow simplicity. This can feel uncomfortable at first. Discomfort does not mean danger. It means your nervous system is learning a new pattern. Transformation happens here. You stop chasing the feeling of calm. You start creating the conditions for rest. And as you practice this, something important changes. Your brain begins to trust that night does not require stimulation to be safe. This brings us back to the foundation of the book. Sleep is permission, not pressure. You are no longer pressuring your brain with novelty. You are giving it permission to power down. The Lord grants peace to his people, not through excitement, not through noise, but through stillness. You now understand why stimulation keeps you awake. Next, we must address what happens when stimulation finally stops, yet the mind still won't let go. You've learned that dopamine is not peace. Now let's talk about the unfinished loops that pull your thoughts back in. Chapter 4. Close the mental loops before bed. If you struggle to sleep with ADHD, you already know this pattern. You lie down. The lights are off. The house is quiet. And suddenly, your mind opens every unfinished file at once. Conversations replay. Tasks resurface. Imagined futures demand attention. This is not random. It is not weakness. It is not anxiety appearing out of nowhere. It is the brain doing exactly what it is designed to do when something feels unfinished. Here is the central truth of this chapter. Sleep cannot occur while mental loops remain open. And the phrase you will return to again and again is simple. Nothing gets solved at midnight. Say it slowly. Nothing gets solved at midnight. From a scientific perspective, the brain is highly sensitive to incompletion. Research in cognitive psychology describes this as the Zeigarnik effect, the tendency for unfinished tasks to remain more active in memory than completed ones. The brain keeps them accessible because it believes resolution is still required. During the day, external structure absorbs much of this pressure. Lists, schedules, and conversations provide containment. At night, those containers disappear. For the ADHD brain, this is when the problem intensifies. ADHD minds often rely more heavily on working memory rather than external systems. Thoughts are held internally. Tasks are remembered mentally. Conversations are replayed to avoid forgetting something important. So when the day ends, the mind does not shut down. It scans, it reviews, it prepares. This is not overthinking. It is unfinished thinking. Neuroscientific research supports this distinction. Studies show that the prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning and future simulation, remains active in people with insomnia. When the brain believes there is unresolved business, it resists disengagement. So here is the mistake many people make. They try to solve the loops. They reason with them. They mentally rehearse. They attempt closure through thinking. But this fails for one simple reason. The brain is not asking for solutions. It is asking for containment. And containment does not happen internally. This leads to the first major transformation of this chapter. Stop trying to finish your thoughts in your head. The ADHD brain is not built to close loops internally at night. It is built to externalize. This is why parking thoughts works better than processing them. Parking is not problem solving. Parking is placement. When a thought arises, the brain wants to know one thing. Will this be handled? You do not answer that question by thinking harder. You answer it by assigning a location. This is where simple pre-sleep rituals become powerful. One of the most effective tools supported by sleep research is externalizing unfinished tasks before bed. Studies on cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia show that writing down worries and tasks earlier in the evening reduces sleep onset time and nighttime awakenings. The key is timing and intention. You do not write to solve, you write to signal. Here is a practical instruction you can use tonight. Set aside 5 to 10 minutes earlier than bedtime, not in bed, not right before sleep. Take a piece of paper or a notebook. Write down anything that feels unfinished: tasks, thoughts, concerns, ideas. Do not organize. Do not prioritize. Do not elaborate. This is not journaling. This is unloading. When the brain sees the loop outside itself, it relaxes. It no longer needs to hold the information active. The nervous system receives the message. This is contained. Then, and this part matters, you close the notebook. Physically closing it is a cue. It marks an end. This simple act does more for sleep than hours of mental effort. Here is another instruction. Do not negotiate with thoughts after midnight. Midnight is not a metaphor. It represents the point at which cognitive resources are depleted. Research on decision making shows that sleep deprivation impairs judgment, increases emotional reactivity, and reduces problem solving ability. So, any solution your brain offers at night feels urgent, but is usually distorted. This is why the phrase matters. Nothing gets solved at midnight. When a thought arises in bed, you respond the same way every time. Not with argument, not with engagement, with repetition. This is noted. This is tomorrow. This is parked. Consistency matters more than cleverness. The goal is not silence. The goal is closure. Another powerful ritual involves conversations. Many ADHD minds replay social interactions at night. Tone, wording, and imagined responses loop endlessly. This happens because social uncertainty triggers vigilance. The brain wants resolution. Here is the instruction. Do not replay conversations in bed. If a conversation feels unresolved, Acknowledge it earlier in the evening. Write one sentence. I will address this if needed. That sentence is enough. The brain does not require a script. It requires assurance. Once again, containment over completion. This chapter is not about stopping thoughts. That would be impossible and unnecessary. It is about teaching your brain that night is not the time for management. Management belongs to the day. Rest belongs to the night. This aligns with both science and ancient wisdom. Neuroscience tells us that the brain needs clear boundaries to disengage. Scripture echoes the same rhythm. Do not worry about tomorrow, the teaching goes, for tomorrow will worry about itself. This is not denial, it is deferral. Deferral is healthy when it is intentional. You are not abandoning responsibility. You are assigning it a time. This is how mental loops close, not through answers, but through trust. As you practice these rituals, something changes. The mind still produces thoughts, but they no longer demand action. The nervous system begins to understand nothing is required right now. And once again, we return to the foundation of the book. Sleep is permission, not pressure. You are giving your brain permission to stop managing life at night. You are teaching it that rest does not mean neglect. In peace, I will lie down and sleep. For you alone make me dwell in safety. Safety is not the absence of responsibility. It is the assurance that responsibility is held elsewhere for the night. You have now learned how to close the loops that keep your mind active. But even with loops closed, many people still struggle because the body itself has not learned a rhythm. You've stopped forcing sleep. You've created safety. You've reduced stimulation. You've closed the mental loops. Now it is time to address what actually trains the nervous system to expect rest. You learned how to end the day. Now let's talk about how to repeat it. Chapter 5, Obedience to Rhythm. Beats motivation. If motivation were enough, you would already be sleeping well. You've tried going to bed earlier when you felt like it. You've tried resetting your sleep after a bad night. You've tried waiting for the right mood, the right level of tiredness, the right mental state, and it keeps failing. This chapter introduces a hard but relieving truth for the ADHD brain. Sleep does not respond to motivation. It responds to rhythm. Or said another way, the phrase you will hear repeatedly in this chapter, you don't need discipline, you need predictability. Why motivation-based sleep fails ADHD brains. Motivation is a dopamine-driven state. It rises with novelty, urgency, and emotional charge. ADHD brains already struggle with dopamine regulation. Asking motivation to solve sleep is like asking caffeine to fix exhaustion. Sleep, on the other hand, is governed primarily by two biological systems: circadian rhythm, your internal 24-hour clock, regulated by light exposure, timing, and consistency; homeostatic sleep pressure, the gradual buildup of sleep need across the day. Neither system cares how motivated you feel. Research from the National Institute of Mental Health and the American Academy of Sleep Medicine shows that inconsistent sleep timing is one of the strongest predictors of insomnia severity, especially in people with ADHD. Irregular bedtimes confuse circadian signaling. The brain stops trusting when sleep is supposed to happen. When that trust is broken, the nervous system stays alert. Motivation based routines fail because they are variable. Rhythm based routines succeed because they are boring. And boring is exactly what sleep requires. The biology of rhythm. Your circadian clock lives in a small cluster of neurons called the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the hypothalamus. Its job is not to make you sleep. Its job is to predict when sleep will happen. Prediction is everything. When bedtime changes night to night, the clock cannot anticipate rest. Hormones like melatonin and cortisol release late, weekly, or at the wrong time. You feel tired but wired, heavy but alert, foggy but restless. This is not a failure of discipline. It is a failure of signaling. ADHD brains are especially sensitive to this because they already struggle with time consistency and internal regulation. The solution is not trying harder. The solution is obedience to rhythm. Obedience is not control. The word obedience matters here. Obedience means you follow something whether you feel like it or not. Not aggressively, not emotionally, simply consistently. You don't argue with the rhythm. You don't negotiate with it. You don't wait for inspiration. You show up. This is why motivation based advice collapses. It assumes internal drive will override biology. Rhythm based living does the opposite. It lets biology lead. And this is where ancient wisdom aligns with modern neuroscience. Evening and morning, an ancient pattern. The Bible opens with a repeated phrase in Genesis, and there was evening, and there was morning. Not morning and evening and morning. This ordering matters. The day begins with winding down, not gearing up, with closure, not striving, with predictability, not stimulation. Long before circadian biology was mapped, human life was structured around rhythmic transitions. Work ended at dusk, light faded gradually, nights were repetitive and uneventful. Modern ADHD insomnia is not caused by laziness or lack of discipline. It is caused by rhythm collapse. We live in a world where nothing signals the day is truly over. What predictability actually looks like. Let's make this practical. Predictability does not mean perfection. It means non-negotiable anchors. Here are the anchors that matter most. 1. Fixed wake time comes first. Do not start with bedtime. Start with wake time. Wake up at the same time every day, regardless of sleep quality. Research consistently shows that wake time regularity stabilizes circadian rhythm faster than adjusting bedtime. Yes, even after a bad night, especially after a bad night. This builds sleep pressure and retrains the clock. 2. A repeating shutdown sequence. Your brain needs to recognize a pattern, not a feeling. Create a 30 to 60 minute pre-bed sequence that happens in the same order every night. Not exciting, not optimized, repetitive, Same lights, same actions, same timing. The nervous system relaxes when it knows what comes next. 3. Remove choice at night. Choice is stimulating. Decisions activate the prefrontal cortex. Predictability removes decisions. You don't ask, should I go to bed now? You go, because the rhythm says it's time. This is not discipline. This is automation. Why this works when everything else fails. ADHD brains resist effortful control, but respond powerfully to external structure. Rhythm is externalized structure over time. Once the body learns the pattern, it begins preparing for sleep before you consciously try. Melatonin rises earlier, heart rate drops sooner, thoughts slow without force. You stop chasing sleep. Sleep starts meeting you halfway. This is the transformation point. You are no longer fighting yourself. You are cooperating with biology. So remember the anchor again. You don't need discipline. You need predictability. What to stop doing immediately. Stop catching up on sleep by shifting your schedule. Stop staying up late because tomorrow feels flexible. Stop treating bedtime as a suggestion instead of a signal. These behaviors train the nervous system to stay vigilant. Consistency trains it to stand down, bringing it back to the book's core theme. This book is not about hacks. It is about retraining trust. Your brain must trust that rest is coming. Your body must trust that night is safe. Your nervous system must trust the rhythm more than your mood. Motivation is unstable. Emotion is unreliable. But rhythm is faithful. You don't conquer sleep. You submit to it. And when you do, it arrives quietly. In the next chapter, we will look at why rhythm alone is sometimes not enough. Even with perfect timing, something may still be keeping you alert. You've aligned your schedule. Now let's talk about what your environment is still feeding your brain without you realizing it. Chapter 6: Light, Sound, and the Invisible Stimulants. You can be exhausted and still unable to sleep. Not because your mind is stubborn, not because you lack willpower, but because your nervous system is still being stimulated, quietly, constantly, invisibly. This chapter reframes sleep disruption for ADHD brains as a sensory problem, not a motivation problem. Long after conscious awareness fades, your senses remain online. They keep sampling the environment. They keep asking one question: is it safe to shut down yet? Here is the principle that will anchor everything you hear next. Your senses never sleep before you do. The science of invisible stimulation. The human nervous system evolved to detect threat and opportunity in low light conditions. That means it is exceptionally sensitive at night. Modern environments exploit this sensitivity. Light, sound, temperature shifts, vibrations, notifications, and even visual clutter all feed into the brainstem and limbic system. These regions regulate arousal, vigilance, and sleep-wake transitions. For ADHD brains, this sensitivity is amplified. Research shows that ADHD is associated with altered sensory gating and heightened cortical responsiveness to stimuli. In simple terms, less information gets filtered out, more gets through, and more keeps the brain awake. Artificial light is the most powerful example. Blue spectrum light from screens suppresses melatonin, the hormone that signals nighttime to the body. Studies from Harvard Medical School and the National Institute of Health consistently show that even low levels of blue light in the evening delay circadian timing and increase alertness. But here's what most people miss: it's not just screens. Overhead, LEDs, bright bathroom lights, TV glow bouncing off walls, even the refrigerator light during a midnight snack. These are small exposures, but the nervous system doesn't measure stimulation morally, it measures it biologically. To your brain, light equals daytime, daytime equals readiness, and readiness is the opposite of sleep. Sound is not neutral. Many people assume sound only matters if it is loud. That assumption is wrong. The auditory system does not shut off during sleep. It remains partially vigilant, scanning for changes. This is why parents wake instantly to a baby's cry, but sleep through traffic noise. For ADHD brains, this vigilance is stronger. Background noise, TV murmurs, podcasts, music, ceiling fans, distant conversations keeps the auditory cortex engaged. Even if the content feels soothing, the brain is still tracking patterns, predicting rhythms, and anticipating change. That prediction activity requires dopamine and norepinephrine. These are alertness chemicals. So when someone says, I fall asleep better with noise, what they often mean is, the noise distracts me from my thoughts. That is not the same as true physiological rest. Remember the anchor. What feels calming can still be activating. White noise can be helpful when it masks sudden environmental sounds, but complex audio, voices, lyrics, evolving soundscapes keeps the brain working. Your nervous system cannot power down while it is still listening for meaning. The myth of low-level stimulation. ADHD insomnia often persists because stimulation doesn't feel intense. It feels subtle, harmless, background, scrolling with night mode on, a dim lamp, a familiar show you've seen 10 times, a podcast playing quietly just in case. None of these feel stimulating. That's the problem. They operate below conscious awareness, but above physiological threshold. Neuroscientists call this sub-threshold activation. The stimulus is not strong enough to demand attention, but strong enough to prevent deactivation. The nervous system stays in a state of standby. Standby is not rest. Standby is readiness, and readiness delays sleep. This is why ADHD brains often feel wired but tired. The cortex wants sleep. The nervous system is still caffeinated by the environment, which leads us to the key reframing of this chapter. These inputs are invisible caffeine. You wouldn't drink espresso at 11:30 p.m., but you might bathe your senses in its equivalent. What to do instead? Sensory obedience. Transformation does not come from doing more. It comes from removing stimulation in the right order. Here are the behavioral shifts that matter. 1. Lower light before you. Lower activity. Most people try to relax first and dim lights later. Reverse that. 2 hours before bed, reduce overall light intensity. Use lamps instead of overhead lights. Choose warm spectrum bulbs. Keep lighting low and consistent. This tells the brainstem that the day is ending, even if your thoughts haven't caught up yet. 2. Eliminate moving light. Static light is less activating than moving light. That means no scrolling, no video, no visual feeds. If you must use a screen, keep it stationary and brief. But understand this: the brain does not distinguish between productive light and entertaining light at night. Light is light. 3. Simplify sound. Choose silence or simple, steady noise. Avoid voices. Avoid narrative. Avoid anything with novelty. If you use sound, it should be boring enough that your brain stops tracking it. Sleep follows boredom. 4. Reduce sensory contrast. Sudden changes keep the nervous system alert. That includes temperature swings, loud transitions, bright flashes, and abrupt noises. Make the environment predictable, consistent, dull. Remember, you don't need stimulation to feel safe. You need familiarity. Why this works for ADHD brains. ADHD brains struggle with self-regulation, but respond exceptionally well to external regulation. When the environment becomes quiet, dim, and repetitive, the nervous system no longer has to decide whether it is safe to rest. The decision is made for it. This bypasses motivation. It bypasses discipline. It works with biology instead of fighting it. Sleep is not an achievement. It is a surrender, and surrender requires conditions. Bringing it back to the bigger picture. Every chapter in this book points to the same truth. You cannot think your way into rest. You must prepare your body to allow it. Light, sound, and subtle stimulation are not moral failures. They are biological signals. When you change the signal, the response changes. You are not broken. Your nervous system has simply been trained to stay awake. That training can be reversed. Your senses never sleep before you do. So let them rest first. In the next chapter, we will take this one step deeper. You have reduced stimulation. Now you must address what the nervous system is still guarding against. You learned how to quiet the environment. Now let's talk about why your body still feels unsafe when everything is quiet. Chapter 6: Light, Sound, and the Invisible Stimulants. You can be exhausted and still unable to sleep. Not because your mind is stubborn, not because you lack willpower, but because your nervous system is still being stimulated quietly, constantly, invisibly. This chapter reframes sleep disruption for ADHD brains as a sensory problem, not a motivation problem. Long after conscious awareness fades, your senses remain online. They keep sampling the environment. They keep asking one question: is it safe to shut down yet? Here is the principle that will anchor everything you hear next. Your senses never sleep before you do. The science of invisible stimulation. The human nervous system evolved to detect threat and opportunity in low light conditions. That means it is exceptionally sensitive at night. Modern environments exploit this sensitivity. Light, sound, temperature shifts, vibrations, notifications, and even visual clutter all feed into the brainstem and limbic system. These regions regulate arousal, vigilance, and sleep wake transitions. For ADHD brains, this sensitivity is amplified. Research shows that ADHD is associated with altered sensory gating and heightened cortical responsiveness to stimuli. In simple terms, less information gets filtered out, more gets through, and more keeps the brain awake. Artificial light is the most powerful example. Blue spectrum light from screens suppresses melatonin, the hormone that signals nighttime to the body. Studies from Harvard Medical School and the National Institute of Health consistently show that even low levels of blue light in the evening delay circadian timing and increase alertness. But here's what most people miss: it's not just screens. Overhead LEDs, bright bathroom lights, TV glow bouncing off walls, even the refrigerator light during a midnight snack. These are small exposures, but the nervous system doesn't measure stimulation morally. It measures it biologically. To your brain, light equals daytime. Daytime equals readiness. And readiness is the opposite of sleep. Sound is not neutral. Many people assume sound only matters if it is loud. That assumption is wrong. The auditory system does not shut off during sleep. It remains partially vigilant, scanning for changes. This is why parents wake instantly to a baby's cry, but sleep through traffic noise. For ADHD brains, this vigilance is stronger. Background noise, TV murmurs, podcasts, music, ceiling fans, distant conversations keeps the auditory cortex engaged. Even if the content feels soothing, the brain is still tracking patterns, predicting rhythms, and anticipating change. That prediction activity requires dopamine and norepinephrine. These are alertness chemicals. So when someone says, "I fall asleep better with noise," what they often mean is, "the noise distracts me from my thoughts." That is not the same as true physiological rest. Remember the anchor? What feels calming can still be activating. White noise can be helpful when it masks sudden environmental sounds, but complex audio, voices, lyrics, evolving soundscapes keeps the brain working. Your nervous system cannot power down while it is still listening for meaning. The myth of low-level stimulation. ADHD insomnia often persists because stimulation doesn't feel intense. It feels subtle, harmless, background. Scrolling with night mode on, a dim lamp, a familiar show you've seen 10 times, a podcast playing quietly just in case. None of these feel stimulating. That's the problem. They operate below conscious awareness, but above physiological threshold. Neuroscientists call this subthreshold activation. The stimulus is not strong enough to demand attention, but strong enough to prevent deactivation. The nervous system stays in a state of standby. Standby is not rest. Standby is readiness, and readiness delays sleep. This is why ADHD brains often feel wired but tired. The cortex wants sleep. The nervous system is still caffeinated by the environment. which leads us to the key reframing of this chapter. These inputs are invisible caffeine. You wouldn't drink espresso at 11:30 p.m., but you might bathe your senses in its equivalent. What to do instead? Sensory obedience. Transformation does not come from doing more. It comes from removing stimulation in the right order. Here are the behavioral shifts that matter. 1. Lower light before you. Lower activity. Most people try to relax first and dim lights later. Reverse that. 2 hours before bed, reduce overall light intensity. Use lamps instead of overhead lights. Choose warm spectrum bulbs. Keep lighting low and consistent. This tells the brainstem that the day is ending, even if your thoughts haven't caught up yet. 2. Eliminate moving light. Static light is less activating than moving light. That means no scrolling, no video, no visual feeds. If you must use a screen, keep it stationary and brief. But understand this: the brain does not distinguish between productive light and entertaining light at night. Light is light. 3. Simplify sound. Choose silence or simple, steady noise. Avoid voices, avoid narrative, avoid anything with novelty. If you use sound, it should be boring enough that your brain stops tracking it. Sleep follows boredom. 4. Reduce sensory contrast. Sudden changes keep the nervous system alert. That includes temperature swings, loud transitions, bright flashes, and abrupt noises. Make the environment predictable, consistent, dull. Remember, you don't need stimulation to feel safe. You need familiarity. Why this works for ADHD brains. ADHD brains struggle with self-regulation, but respond exceptionally well to external regulation. When the environment becomes quiet, dim, and repetitive, the nervous system no longer has to decide whether it is safe to rest. The decision is made for it. This bypasses motivation. It bypasses discipline. It works with biology instead of fighting it. Sleep is not an achievement. It is a surrender, and surrender requires conditions. Bringing it back to the bigger picture, every chapter in this book points to the same truth. You cannot think your way into rest. You must prepare your body to allow it. Light, sound, and subtle stimulation are not moral failures. They are biological signals. When you change the signal, the response changes. You are not broken. Your nervous system has simply been trained to stay awake. That training can be reversed. Your senses never sleep before you do, so let them rest first. In the next chapter, we will take this one step deeper. You have reduced stimulation. Now you must address what the nervous system is still guarding against. You learned how to quiet the environment. Now let's talk about why your body still feels unsafe when everything is quiet. Chapter 7. Anxiety is anticipation without structure. Anxiety at night is often misunderstood. It is not always fear. It is not always panic. And for many people with ADHD, it is not even emotional in origin. Nighttime anxiety is anticipation without structure. Throughout the day, your attention is externally contained. Tasks, schedules, messages, responsibilities, and deadlines give the mind edges. They create borders. Even if the day is stressful, it is at least defined. Then night arrives, structure dissolves, expectations loosen, time opens up, and the ADHD brain does what it does best. It jumps forward, not because something bad is happening now, but because nothing is holding the future in place. The neuroscience of anticipation. From a scientific perspective, anxiety is strongly linked to the brain's predictive systems. The anterior cingulate cortex and the default mode network become more active when the mind simulates future scenarios, especially when outcomes are uncertain. Research published in Biological Psychiatry shows that people with ADHD have heightened default mode activity during rest states, particularly when external structure drops away. The brain fills the silence with projections. At night, this looks like replaying conversations that haven't happened yet, mentally rehearsing tomorrow's responsibilities, imagining future outcomes without resolution. This is not fear of the present moment. This is the nervous system scanning forward without guardrails. That is why telling yourself to calm down rarely works. There is nothing concrete to calm from. The anxiety is coming from the future. Why the ADHD brain jumps forward at night. The ADHD nervous system is highly sensitive to transitions. When a clear container ends, the mind seeks the next one. During the day, structure answers the question, what am I supposed to be doing right now? At night, that question goes unanswered. So the brain creates its own task, anticipation. This is why anxiety often increases right as you lie down. The body is still, the environment is quiet, and the mind suddenly has unlimited bandwidth. Without structure, anticipation becomes endless. And endless anticipation keeps the nervous system alert. Anxiety is not the enemy. This matters deeply for transformation. If you treat nighttime anxiety as a personal flaw, you will fight yourself. If you treat it as a chemical imbalance alone, you will feel powerless. But if you understand it correctly, anxiety becomes information. It is a signal that containment is missing. The solution is not reassurance. The solution is structure. Structure as a nervous system container. In earlier chapters, we discussed rhythm, predictability, and safety cues. Now we add another layer, cognitive containment. Containment means the brain knows where thoughts belong. When tomorrow feels unbounded, the mind tries to manage it now. When tomorrow is placed somewhere safe, the mind can rest. This is where practical intervention begins. A simple nighttime containment practice. Here is a scientifically grounded, behaviorally effective practice that works especially well for ADHD insomnia. Externalize tomorrow. Before bed, take 5 minutes and write down the top 3 things that matter tomorrow. One realistic first action for each. One thing that can wait. This is not problem solving. This is assignment. Studies in cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia show that cognitive offloading significantly reduces pre sleep arousal. When the brain sees tasks placed externally, default mode activation decreases. You are telling the nervous system, this has a place. It is handled, not now. Once written, you do not revisit it. The container is closed. Why faith works, where reassurance fails. For many people with ADHD, logic alone is not enough. The mind can always create another scenario. This is where faith functions not as an emotion, but as an external authority over time. Faith says, the future is not mine to manage right now. This is not denial. This is delegation. The phrase you will hear often in this chapter is simple and grounding. Tomorrow belongs to God. Tonight belongs to rest. This statement does something powerful. It removes ownership of the future from the anxious mind. Research in psychology consistently shows that perceived control reduces anxiety. Faith reframes control, not by increasing it, but by placing it somewhere stable. You are not abandoning responsibility. You are assigning timing. What to stop doing at night. Transformation requires subtraction. Stop mentally rehearsing conversations that haven't happened. Stop optimizing tomorrow after midnight. Stop confusing preparation with rumination. Preparation happens in daylight. Rumination thrives in the dark. Your brain does not need more foresight at night. It needs permission to stop scanning. What to start doing instead. End the day with containment, not consumption. Close tomorrow before opening the bed. Use written structure instead of mental looping. And when anticipation resurfaces, do not argue with it. Repeat the anchor gently. Tomorrow belongs to God. Tonight belongs to rest. This repetition is not spiritual bypassing. It is nervous system training. Over time, the brain learns that night is no longer a planning zone. It becomes a boundary, bringing it back to the core theme. This book is teaching your nervous system when it is safe to let go. Anxiety persists when the future feels unheld. Sleep returns when the future is placed somewhere secure. You are not broken for feeling anxious at night. You are uncontained. Structure contains the mind. Rhythm contains the body. Faith contains time. And when anticipation has a home, rest becomes possible. You've learned how to stop forcing sleep. You've learned how to regulate stimulation and rhythm. You've learned how to contain tomorrow. I hope you found peace and clarity in this audiobook. If it helped you, share it with someone who needs rest but doesn't know how to find it yet. Remember, Jesus does not rush you or pressure you. He invites you into rest. Tonight, lay your burdens down, trust what you've learned, and allow your mind and body to sleep. knowing you are held, watched over, and never alone.